applied to UMass and are non-residents, because it's a data set you can see. And you wonder, who are these people that are applying and donating money to UMass and then not able to get in at all? At most state schools, they'll accept some out-of-state applicants, and that's sort of it's that little crack that you see and you want to get into it. It's generally not a reasonable assumption that you can get into one of those very finessed spots. In most instances, if it's under 20% out-of-state applicants, most of those are individuals that are really more on their diversity side of the list. That is, that they're not looking for the mainstream run-of-the-mill applicant that they have in their state. They're looking for people that really are diversifying their class in some way. And so certainly there are underrepresented minorities that are still given some special preferences in those kinds of situations because they're not filling their class locally and they want to include that into it. And sometimes there's other reasons and relationships to the school that make sense for that individual applicant. But my general rule of thumb is that if a state school doesn't take at least 30% from out of state, don't donate money to them. It doesn't make any sense. Now, when we get to the private schools, clearly they're looking for the best applicants from everywhere, but there are some regional preferences there. And so schools in the Midwest certainly kind of have a preference for individuals from the Midwest. They're looking for people who are going to more likely be part of their world and not people that are just sort of coming in. And this is particularly true, I think, when you're from the Northeast, where we have so many private schools. When you start looking at private schools in the South or in the Midwest, it seems to me, and it's not like anyone has put this out there on black and white, but it seems to me there are regional preferences there for people not from the Northeast, because you already have enough schools. We have to take care of our kids, and we want our students to be here. So there's something else to consider. These are not absolute rules, but this is one of the things you're going to be looking at. State residency is a big issue when you apply to medical school. Some states have no schools, and your state residency kind of a state school. But it doesn't mean you don't have some value to other schools who are always touting how many different states are represented in their class. So I constantly see we have matriculants from 47 states in our school. It's a way of trying to talk about what their diversity is. And so sometimes you come from a state with no school, there aren't many applicants, and that sometimes helps you as well. Worst case scenarios, you're from a state that has thousands of applicants to medical school. Let's say California. California still pumps out more pre-meds than most other states combined. And that makes it incredibly competitive in the UC system. You said, well, there's 5 medical schools in California, that's great. Average GPAs in California schools are the highest in the country. Average MCAT scores tend to be the highest in the country. And then you say, well, I'll apply elsewhere. And now you're in the horde of Californians applying every place else. I remember one year, Tufts had 4,000 applications from California. And there's no way they could fill up their class with Californians. They'll take some, but they're not going to take all Californians. So sometimes you're kind of screwed by where you grew up. Basically what happens. Now, you can live someplace and declare, let's say Massachusetts, and say, I'm a Massachusetts resident, even if UMass doesn't accept you as that. And you don't have to be, but sometimes you don't want to give up your state residency if you have a value to it. And so you do need an address of that state, or at least an address you can trust to that state. So state residency is one of the factors that comes into it. Clearly, a lot of our applicants tend to apply between DC and Hanover, New Hampshire. That seems to be the big stretch of where most of our applicants are applying. There are a lot of schools in that stretch, so you can get it to 25, 30 pretty quickly. You also see Chicago being an interesting. We have a lot of students who are interested in going back to the West Coast. I mean, I understand that, but those are tough schools to get into, even if you're from the West Coast. We don't see a lot of students applying to Kansas, for example.
Thank you.
Or Iowa.
That makes me unique.
Oklahoma. We do see some applicants for Florida. Again, that's another tough state to get into as an out-of-state applicant, although I don't know the Florida rules, so I get very cautious because they change. And what happened 2 years ago, maybe they changed the law, and oh man, I don't know what happened now. So I get very cautious and say, that's something you have to talk about with the school. And this is frustrating sometimes because I've had students call California and they'll get a different answer from each of the schools. It's like, you're all listening to the same law. How can you come up with a different response? So I stay out of it, to make that decision. But anyway, so not only do you think about sort of where you want to live, you also have to think about where can I get to for an interview and afford it. And if you are here taking classes, the Northeast tends to be obviously much cheaper, as is the other coast. The expensive tickets are in the middle of the country than one and a half ticket. Much more expensive to fly to the middle and to fly all the way across. It's just crazy. So we have residencies. We've got, obviously, the timing of this whole thing. So again, most schools have rolling admissions. So sometimes I get baffled to have a student who applies, June 5th, 12:01 a.m., they're there, they punch it in, and then they're taking the NCAP in August. Well, no school cares that you exist until your application is complete. And by complete, that means that they've had your verified AMCAS information, they have your MCAT scores, and they have all your letters of recommendation. Then you're a real candidate, then they're going to look at you. So what happens is that they may send you secondaries. And sometimes you get all excited, I got my first secondary. And you get all excited to fill that out. What you really should be doing is studying for your MCAT. You're not worried about the secondaries, or not putting secondaries aside and letting them sit there and go tick, 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 tick. Because medical schools have sent them to you, and they keep track of the day they sent it, and they keep track of the day it comes back. Now, there is no rule about this, although some of them say they need it back in a certain time frame, but most of them will say you need it by our application deadline, which might be October 30th, November 15th. But they're counting the days, and they're looking at that going, well, we sent you that in July, we need to get it back till September. You're really not that interested in us. It's just, there's something off there. But anyway, we can talk about individually about the timing of things. If you are taking an MCAT that's later, my recommendation is not to send an AMCAS too early and trigger all those secondaries at a time when you really shouldn't be bothered by them. But now that we've gotten such crazy sort of verification times, what I've seen some students doing is kind of gaming the system a little bit, which is applying with AMCAS with just one school. That gets everything rolling. And then wait until you're prepared for secondaries to then update AMCAS and add schools to the list, which is the same cost as doing the original. There's no upcharge for adding schools after the fact. It's still $30 a pop. So that's certainly something to consider if you want to game the system a little bit. But the ideal applicant has their MCAT scores in no later than July, has their AMCAS application in June, and has arranged for all of their letters of recommendation to be either sent to your advisor or to the program, wherever you're going to organize this process to get them to where they need to be. Now, for our purposes in the Health Careers Program, we write what's called a composite letter of recommendation. This is something that we consider or is called sponsorship, which is our sort of narrative about your journey, which has excerpts from individual letters of recommendation. Most of our applicants have between 5 and 7 letters of individual recommendation. Now, those letters really should be as diverse as possible to give the best breadth of story that's possible. It's not necessary and not even appropriate to get a letter from chem, bio, physics, and orgo. Those are all the same letter. Big, large class, don't really know the student, but the TF says this. Now you need those letters, and you should have 2 of them. But more than 2 adds nothing to your equation. So 2 science letters, ideally a letter from undergrad, hopefully something that's not science. Maybe something that gives you more diverse. It might be an advisor, it might be someone you had a small class with that actually knows you, as opposed to Greg Tucci, who has 300 students in his class and doesn't know anybody really. I mean, some of the faces are familiar. The same thing when I was teaching the nature bio during the year, about 300 students. It's like 5 of them I would know well, and the rest, with names, faces sometimes. But they're required. But the other letters, those are the letters that you start to set yourself apart. What makes you different? what brought you to this path? That should be a journey that is documented with letters of recommendation. Employers, supervisors, people that have seen you in a medical setting. You really want to get all of those sort of different pieces together. Now, when you apply on your own, that's much more difficult to do. You can apply on your own, but then you have to start looking at what the schools are requiring. And they'll say, we want 3 letters of recommendation, one has to be this, one has to be that, one has to be something else. But if you're applying through an advising office and you're having either a package of letters being sent or a committee or composite letter being sent, then you kind of trump all of their individual rules. And I mean, we have people that use what we call our dossier service, where we just have the letters gathered in our office and we send it as a single package through our system that connects to AMCAS or connects to DO schools, connects to some of the international schools, and they have, you can download that, and as a letter packet, they're willing to take that as opposed to individual letters coming in. Now, the AMCAS system has made it a little bit easier to apply on your own, and it's not required. But the one thing you don't need is set up an Infolio account. There's no reason for it, there's no purpose to it, and you can certainly do this process without an Infolio taking your money. So anyway, the ideal applicant have all their letters in, let's say for us, we'd like them all by really the end of May. But here's where things, I mean, I still have 3 applicants who are trying to apply this year, still waiting for letters. Now we had 79 applicants complete, 2 of them just today, so up to today.